Convicted of rape, found guilty of sexually assaulting an unconscious woman behind a dumpster at Stanford University. Yet Brock Turner, he only got a 6-month sentence, but his father says his son is also a victim. This is part of a letter that the father sent to the court. Quote, "His life will never be the one that he dreamed about and worked so hard to achieve. That is a steep price to pay for 20 minutes of action out of his 20-plus years of life." Let's be clear. The real victim here, the woman who was raped, she wrote a letter directly to the perpetrator, and she read it in court. Here is part of that. "You took away my worth, my privacy, my energy, my time, my intimacy, my confidence, my own voice until today. The damage is done. No one can undo it. And now we both have a choice. We can let this destroy us. I can remain angry and hurt, and you can be in denial. Or we can face it head on. I accept the pain, you accept the punishment, and we move on." Now, people, as you'd imagine, are furious at a bunch of things, but including the father, saying it's the rape victim's life that in fact was ruined, and his son was the one that was at fault. But there's also huge backlash against the judge for handing out such a light sentence. 300,000 people have signed a petition to recall Superior Court Judge PERSKY, but he just won another 6-year term in an uncontested election. Judge PERSKY is a Stanford alumni who was captain of the lacrosse team. Brock Turner was a star swimmer. Critics are speculating that the Stanford athlete connection could be a reason for the light sentence. I want to get to the judge in a second, but Jimmy, Doria, but by far your wife's the better half of the two of you. I do, because the organization that she works for and that the guys here have gotten familiar through you is Hope Story. It's an outstanding organization who helps women who have been victims of abuse, who helps them in so many ways get their lives back together. And sometimes I think when we report or we hear the news and you hear assault and the sentence or whatever, it doesn't justly put a face on what these people have to go through and how their lives are so scarred. And the idea, and I think the father spoke unfortunately for more people than we imagined, to say, it was 20 minutes. It's going to hurt this kid's life here. They don't get the gravity of what that attack means. And I know, obviously, Deborah has spoken about it at length in her organization as well, but try and put a face on it.
Well, you know, it's focusing on his 20 minutes during which he perpetrated such a heinous and despicable crime without giving any mention of what in 20 minutes, how you can literally devastate a young lady's life forever. You know, that is going to last with her forever. But the problem as well is when you see a sentence meted out like this, the message to young ladies is not to go forward. You're not going to be listened to. It's not going to be appreciated. And I can't stress enough, as much as Hope's Door stresses so much, that you do have to come forward. You have to come forward to help yourself. You have to come forward to seek justice. And you know, you need to know that these sentences are very rare. You know, you get convicted of a crime like that in New York State, in places that I'm familiar with, you do go to jail. But it is important for these women to come forward for themselves. There's something more to be gained than just the sentence. Now,
Doug, I wanted to get into the judge portion of this. I know we all echo what Jimmy said. I believe in judicial discretion, and I don't think that we should have knee-jerk reactions every time there's a verdict to remove it. But we have seen cases, that judge in Montana, for one, with some unbelievable insensitive remarks after an attack, and then this. I'm not going to ascribe motive. I don't know if there's some Stanford athlete connection. I think it's an easy surface, quick thing. But by the facts of the case, and then the tone deafness from the family of the perpetrator, to still hand down a 6-month sentence, how should judicial reassessments work? Should it just be at the ballot box, or should it be, wait a minute, this guy's the meter of justice here. He shouldn't be wearing a robe.
Well, Rich, you have to really take a step back for a second. The facts of a case like this are heinous. They're horrible. You know, it's terrible. People, victims, we get that. But we don't have the masses sentence the people after this. We don't do that. We have a judge, and the judge is there, and he's representing the rule of law. And now, whether you disagree or agree with his call, he's looking at the aggravating factors, the mitigating factors, and he's rendering a sentence at the end of the day. If you let, he can't sentence him more harsher because the family is insensitive, which they truly were.
Stupid letters.
This could be a horrible sentence, but we still have a process, and the process has to be followed. And you may disagree with it, but he at least expressed why he did it.
I get that. I do, and I think that makes sense. But there are cases where there's no jurisprudence, okay? And what should our expectation of a judge be? You can't just be like, hey, he's batting 300, it's okay. You got to do better than that.
Well, in most jurisdictions.
And I've read the facts of this case here. It's not that there was questions of debate or whatever. She clearly was unconscious. He clearly did this. Again, this is behind a dumpster at a school. He took no accountability for his actions. Right. I don't know anybody who thinks 6 months fits, Mark.
And they say he was drunk, but he had the ability to get up and run away when the two guys on the bicycle showed up.
Yep.
Here's the thing. In most jurisdictions, in California is one of them, the judge's sentencing discretion is not absolute. It's constrained by laws that have statutory factors that the judge is supposed to consider. And it's not just the severity of the crime. You take account the person's history and characteristics, his whole lifetime, was this an isolated incident, et cetera, et cetera. By all accounts, prosecutorial and defense accounts, this judge has an excellent judicial record. Everyone agrees that he took into account the relevant factors under the statute. You can take issue with how he balanced them. I'm not that familiar with California law, but I assume the balancing of the factors is confided to that judge's individual discretion. Nobody says, well, very few people say he made an error of law. I don't know what the right to appeal a sentence is in California, but generally, judges out there are elected. If they didn't like what he was doing before this case, they shouldn't have reelected him in an uncontested election, and by the same token, you don't pull him because you don't like one ruling in a single case. If there's a right of appeal, the state should vindicate it.
And I agree in terms of a recall. As much as I disagree with the sentence, we cannot have judges thinking that their jobs are going to be on the line if they give too light a sentence to somebody, because you're taking away their discretion, and next thing you know, they're just going to be hammering people.
You know, as far as the dopey letters from the family, you can't really penalize the kid for that. You wonder where the lawyer is submitting a letter like that, but I think the father actually tweeted that out, so he can't control that. You know, it's an entitled kind of person, the father.
This next one we've touched on in the past, but it really begs a debate, especially in the post-9/11 world. Good aggressive policing or entrapment? Well, that's a question being asked as the FBI does more and more sting operations to snare guys purported to be part of ISIS plots. Are the feds crossing the line, or are they just keeping us safe?